Hello, welcome to another short video revising key GCSE topics. Today we're going to look at another topic within B2, and this topic is all about what happens at a synapse. Now, the first thing I'll draw your attention to is this image of a nerve cell in the corner. Now, a nerve cell is often referred to as a neuron. A neuron has an axon, which is the backbone of the cell itself. It has these little bits of insulation here known as a myelin sheath, and that helps to insulate the electric signal or impulse. And that's very similar to the rubber around a wire. But what we're going to talk about today specifically is what happens at the very ends of your dendrites and dendrons. At the end of each of these, you have got a gap that then will connect to another nerve cell. And that gap is more commonly known as a synapse. A synapse is the gap between two neurons. Now, synapses are really important because in order for the electrical impulse to pass from one nerve cell to another, to make itself up to your central nervous system and then to whichever part of the body that signal needs to go to, it needs to pass through more than one synapse. Now, when an electrical signal gets to a synapse, it travels down one nerve. Now, this long section of the nerve is part of one of these dendrites at the end, and it will get down to these dendrites after it's traveled through the axon, which is, like I said, this backbone over here. Now, this electrical impulse will travel down the dendrites where it gets to the very end of the neuron. Now, as it gets down here, it triggers the release of these neurotransmitters. Now, these little green dots represent stores of neurotransmitters, which are a chemical which will be released once the electrical impulse has been received to the very end. Now, when these neurotransmitters are released, they then diffuse across this gap, across the synapse. On the second neuron, you have these receptors here. Now, these receptors will bind only to specific neurotransmitters from the previous neuron. When those neurotransmitters are detected by the receptors, they trigger they stimulate the new electrical impulse to be transmitted along the next neuron. So, very, very simply, you have an electrical impulse traveling down one neuron. It reaches the end of the neuron where there are these stores of neurotransmitters stored in these vesicles. The neurotransmitter diffuses across the gap as a chemical. It is then detected by receptors on your second neuron, and a second electrical impulse is stimulated from this binding and travels along the neuron to the next synapse when it gets there. It's a very simple process if you think about it as a step-by-step process. It's really useful to make a flashcard on that, standalone flashcard, and it can be very, very useful to draw the diagram and then label it with the steps. So that's a synapse. And like I said, those are really important in making sure that the nervous electrical impulses are transmitted effectively throughout our bodies.